Single currency, ECOWAS ministers of finance and governors of central bank meet in Abuja. Record 10.59 trillion naira budget for 2020 thrills Nigerians. Central Bank of Nigeria to auction treasury bills in first quarter of 2020. And only 5 states participate in contributory pension scheme. Details of these and more on this edition of Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. And I am Muplang Dakok. It's so good to know you're with us on Business Express. ECOWAS ministers and governors of central banks are meeting in Abuja to discuss further on the eco currency initiative. We have our correspondent, Chimobi Walter Naji, on ground.
Thank you very much, Studio. You know, the issue of the common currency for ECOWAS countries within the ECOWAS region has been on for about 2 years now. Discussions has been going on at different levels, but here today, the main Council of Ministers are meeting with central bank governors across the ECOWAS member countries, you know, to look into issues that would probably be some sort of challenge to ensure that the implementation of the ECOWAS currency within the region is without any hitch. And of course, at the end of the meeting, it is expected that you know, they will come out with a strong word and of course establish a central bank within the ECOWAS region to take care of the implementation of that particular currency. And of course, again, some of the other issues that you know, were raised are the benefits that, you know, this currency will stand to be for countries that are member countries. For instance, the issue of having a currency that can play favorably at the international level with other stronger currencies that is higher than what individual member countries have within their own countries as per currencies. But you know, it is believed that with the establishment of this common currency, it would aid more trade integration between the ECOWAS region, and of course help in a lot of other issues that may come with finance and trade.
Was there any issue of the closure of Nigeria's land border at the meeting?
Yes. The minister also had took out time, you know, to ensure and you know, tell member countries that are present for the meeting that the closure of the land borders in Nigeria is not intended to cause any harm for any of the member countries. No, but it's actually stating that the closure of the land border is to ensure that countries within the border areas, you know, agree on what terms of trade should be adopted, and you know, ensuring that whatever agreements that is reached, whatever treaties that is reached as to the movement of trade within the countries is completely adhered to. And she also went further to ensure to you know, tell member countries that Nigeria, in no distant time, once these measures are fully put in place, would open up its land border for trade, you know, within the region. That it's actually not for to cause problem for any other country, but to ensure that what is right is done, you know, within the border communities.
Thank you very much, Chimobi, for giving us that update. The federal government says it will be able to track monies linked to tax evasion, terrorist financing and corruption with the establishment of a register for beneficial owners. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, at a roundtable on beneficial ownership register in Nigeria in Abuja, said all stakeholders are encouraged to be ambitious in the plans for implementing the beneficial ownership transparency reforms.
This register will be launched sometime next week, I think on the 12th of December. That is an excellent first step. But we will all be working together with you to make sure that the CAC, who should really be leading on this, establishes this beneficial ownership register beyond the extractive industry, but to wider businesses in the country. But we believe also your establishing this register will act as a linchpin for the CSE to make more progress. We prepared a national action plan for 2017 to 2019. The essence of our journey in the OGP was to further deepen and mainstream transparency mechanisms within government systems so that it's not on an ad hoc basis, and also to further reinforce citizens' engagement in the management of public resources.
Went out to feel the pulse of Nigerians on the 2020 budget. This was what they brought back.
This is the first of its kind that the budget for the next year is being passed before the year. Because we have been seeing budgets year in, out, no performance, nothing, no index reports, nothing. We just see the budget has been passed, budget has been closed. That's all we have been seeing. But I pray that with this new night assembly and this move to pass the budget before the year runs off, so that the new year will start with a new budget. Let's pray that it's going to be a new beginning for the nation.
The executive will hasten it up. It will be good now to return it back to the cycle of January to December.
We will not just want to be talking about the releases, the passing of budgets. We want to see how it is being released accordingly, appropriately, and timely.
I'm so happy it happened so fast, so quickly, and I hope all the work to be done quickly as well.
It's okay, at least we are coming back to normal. That is how it's supposed to be. But just like I said, the issue now is left to the presidency. If the president signs it to law in time.
Budget passage will surely interest Nigerians and the economic community as it shows fiscal direction of the government. Our discussion today is on the 2020 appropriation bill, and we have Senator Jibrin Barrow, Chairman, Senate Committee on Appropriation. Thank you very much for coming on Business Express today.
Good afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon.
And we also have an economist, Paul Alaje.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on Business Express. So we have the 2020 appropriation bill passed by the Senate. They've kept their promise. They said they were going to pass the budget early, and they did. And this is about 11 years since the last time we had an early passage of the bill. So you are a member of the Senate. What prompted this early passage of the bill by the Senate, by the National Assembly?
Well, thank you very much for this question. If you may recall, during the campaign for the presidency of the Senate, the current Senate president had always emphasized the need to change the budget cycle of this country to begin from January to December of every year. And he said the moment, that whenever he was elected, that he was going to put that at the front burner. In fact, when we, after the election, and he became the Senate president, and when we were putting together the agenda for the 9th Senate, that also came into our agenda. And the good thing, the good thing that came with that was the fact that the president himself stated from the beginning that he's also determined to see that we work together in ensuring a situation where we have a budget cycle that will begin from January and to end from December. And everybody bought into that view the entire Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the members of the House of Representatives, everyone came on board on this very, very important viewpoint. And we worked with the executive. The executive came, worked very hard to put together his proposal that was submitted to the president. They were having sleepless night, workers, the civil servants being in the office, sleeping in the office to make sure that the proposal was brought in time. And they brought it in time. And we also said, oh, well, this is our will. We have this will. We are determined. And we work together
very much,
in
Senator.
collaboration with the executive to make sure that the budget was passed yesterday.
All right. Let's go to Mr. Alaje. What impact do you see this return of the budget from January to December? What impact do you think it's going to have on Nigeria's economy?
Yeah, thank you so very much. First of all, let me thank the Senate and the representative. This is what our community have advocated for. Most investors, they're already planning for what next year will be like. If you are a country that is not serious, you start your own fiscal year by July or September, if you like. And most of the investment around the world would have reduced. World Bank, Moody, among other international organizations, and IMF have warned Nigeria in previous times. That is important. Nigeria also work alongside with what the rest of the world is doing, particularly countries that want to be classified as developed country or truly emerging economies. So for me, the fact that we now have January to December, which is one of the major issues we've advocated for, that the National Assembly and the Executive should work together and pull all of this together. I'm happy it's coming. But if the Senate president leaves, just as he said, what is the guarantee that it will continue? That now means Senate and House of Representatives, we now need to pass a law that mandates executives to submit MTF by July or September, as the case may be. Then budget submission will happen by September, and by December, as it's been done now, Senate will pass it, the whole National Assembly will pass it. The executive has perhaps 15 days or 21 working days to assent to it. So the 1st of January, when Mr. President is reading his goodwill message, budget summary will be inclusive in it.
All right, let's go back to the distinguished. So this early passage of the budget, do you see it helping out or giving birth to an effective implementation of proposed projects?
We have, it will help in the implementation process, that's for sure. And besides, as you said, it will help the business community because you can now plan with some degree of certainty. Businesses can calculate their risks, calculate their benefits, and see how they can mitigate the risks. Unlike before, when the whole thing was not really, it wasn't so much arranged that sometimes you could see the financial year beginning in July, sometime in May, sometime in August, and so on and so forth. So it gave some, it allowed for uncertainties, in terms of, arranging businesses, even governmental activities. But for now, things will now work perfectly well. It is done now in line with global best practices. That's what is applicable in other climes, developed climes. And for sure, the advantages, the benefits are enormous. There are so many, and the country will be better for it.
All right, still with you, Senator. There has been a lot of talks about financing the 2020 budget. So, but there's also a disparity in the figure that was submitted to the two chambers of the National Assembly. For instance, 10.3 billion naira was submitted and 10.5 is what was passed. So what are those indices that made the budget to increase?
Well, we did not do that in an arbitrary manner. This is we took into consideration the fact. You see, let me say one thing. The budgetary process in every democracy is created in the way that, yes, you have the proposal from the presidency, then the proposal is brought to the National Assembly for one reason, to make sure that the whole budget is well put together, so that there will be more work on it, to make sure that the country is really, gets the best out of the process. So the president brought a very, very wonderful proposal. But when we worked on it, then we saw that there were certain revenues that were not, harvested in that proposal. So we decided to bring in those revenue, factor them into the revenue profile, and so we got more money. And these monies were applied to various areas where the funding for them in the proposal brought by Mr. President were not adequate. And some other areas, the funding were not even there. The fundings were not even there. So that's what happened. So it was informed by the fact that certain gaps were closed in terms of the revenues that were, we have the problem of revenue leakage in this country. And, the presidency or the executive cannot, nobody's perfect. They did a wonderful job. But when we acted on the budget, then we saw those revenue areas that could be harvested, and we harvested them and then utilized them for development of the country.
Okay, let's go back to Mr. Paul Alaje. With this disparity, do you see, or how do you see the budget being financed? We initially had 10.3 trillion. Now it's
in fact, what was submitted by Mr. President was even a bit lower than this. You recall that when MTEX was submitted, it was far lower than $57 per barrel. But National Assembly has encouraged Mr. President that you might need to jack it up to $57 per barrel, and the executive accepted. So $57 per barrel was submitted. And there are other things in which revenue target, mark you, a budget is proposed income and proposed expenditure. So the other target given is how do we increase more revenue, because there are certain expenditure we need to spend. Now this is the issue. The budget being submitted is not budget surplus, it is deficit, which means we'll be borrowing more money to finance it. This is my fear in increase. I would have wanted a situation where we have tested our ability to improve revenue maybe a year or 2 years before we start to increase revenue target. Most of the agencies of government, perhaps we still want to use, except if we are bringing new narratives for these agencies of government to generate more revenue. Over the years, what you see is that revenue window is largely, what is most certain is what comes from crude oil. The non-oil sector seems to be the same until maybe very recently that we start seeing some percentage increase in the revenue that are being generated. So for us as an organization, for me as an individual, I would say, yeah, 10.3, 10.5, the gap, when you look at it in percentage, is really not much compared to what was submitted at first. The issue now is that how do we generate, and particularly speaking as a Nigerian for Nigerians, how do we ensure that 20%, which is capital expenditure, is not further depleted? And perhaps the way we have in a long time, budget being passed, being submitted back to the National Assembly, and harmonization is taking place, is going to be communicated to the executive for assent. How do we ensure that for the first time we can have 100% implementation on capital part of the budget, which for me is the key issue, and we can see more presence in terms of capital spenders? You're talking about revenue. There's expected revenue of 1.8 trillion from non-oil revenue sources. Yes. So do you see this helping to bridge the gap? Going by this expectation? We're looking at 1.8 trillion naira coming from non-oil sector. And when you look at the subsector of non-oil sector, you see capital, company income tax, you see a component that comes to federal government, because when you say there is increase in VAT, largely that will help state government. Federal government is not going to benefit a lot from that, because about 80-85% goes to state government so that they can pay minimum wage, which is the truth. Only 11 out of 36 government and FCT, only 11 have good books. The remaining don't have good books. Federal government will still come back to help most of the state, and that is why the burden will keep being on the neck of federal government. So do I see that possible? I think if we can look at some revenue windows, which I think the senator has mentioned, that you will see how they can harvest that. But we only hope that in the coming period, most of this window will be optimized and we see have more revenue for the country. All right, back to you, distinguished. The federal government has said it's going to borrow about $22.7 billion. Is this part of the plans to, finance the budget?
Well, that component, the borrowing the federal government has shown its interest in getting it done for the country has not been brought to the National Assembly. We will not be able to say until that is brought and we've seen, what is really contained in that plan. So for now, we're waiting to see the request being presented to the National Assembly. Then I can be able to make comment. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. So I just have to wait for the president to submit whatever he's going to submit. Then we know what purpose, what are the components and what they are meant to fund.
All right. Mr. Alaji, how do we sustain this momentum of passage of the budget and then having the calendar from January to December?
Backing it up by law, there could be an executive bill sent to National Assembly that says, mandate us, July latest, we want to submit MTF to you, and you also have 1 month, so it's going to be both ways, both arms of government. Make sure you have start on MTF within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. That is what we've seen in this administration in this year 2019, and ensure that you submit budget to us not later than first week of September, or worst case scenario, end of September, because legislature might not be around in August break or so. But before you go on your end of the year break, make sure budget is passed and submitted to the executive. I would also like to encourage that most of the time, while committees are meeting with MDAs, agencies of government, they are representatives of the executive. Perhaps those that will advise the president on the budget, because I don't expect the president to read budget page to page from beginning to the end. He will have to abandon some other project. But he has essays and senior special assistant on some of these things who could also be helping National Assembly to review, so that we don't have to go back forth and back over you need to add your figures over and over again. Everyone is working for the goal of Nigeria. If this is done, we're not going to save just 1 week or 2 weeks or month. We'd have saved a lot of time. When it gets to the president's table, perhaps 1 week or so, a review goes on it, and finally we can say we have our budget as at when due.
All right, I'll go back to you, the Senator. The 2019 budget is supposed to expire first quarter of 2020, and then the one for 2020 is supposed to start at about the same time. How do you manage?
No.
How does the country manage that?
What we agree is that projects in the 2019 budget will now be rolled over to 2020 budget, and that's what the federal government did. I mean, the executive arm of government did, and that's what we are working on. And the 2020 budget is going to begin from 1st January 2020 and end 34th December 2020. This is how it's going to be. That arrangement has been concluded, and we have agreed on the modality to allow for this, for the 2019 budget to be rolled over to 2020 budget. But let me add about the issue of revenue. Well, as I said, we did not increase the budget in an arbitrary manner. We took cognizance of the revenues that were not harvested, they were not brought into the federal, the executive proposal. Okay. We do a lot of work. The will is there to make sure that we turn things around for the betterment of this country in the National Assembly. We do that. Take, for instance, the PCS, the PSC production sharing contract. These are, huge amount of monies for several years that should have accrued to the coffers of federal government and indeed the federation. But that was not really captured. That was not harvested. So we made sure that we amend the law so that that money would come into the coffers of all the tiers of the government. And that's what we also did in other non-oil revenues, like the stamp duty and so on and so forth. These were not captured in the initial revenue revenue projection that was submitted to us, and we're able to get that done, and that's why we had this money that we're able to add to the to the expenditure of the government.
Sorry, we have to end the discussion. Our time is up, but we have to appreciate you very much, Senator Jibrin Barrow, for coming on Business Express today.
Thank you for having me. And
also our regular on Business Express, Mr. Paul Alaje.
Thank you so much
for coming. I will take quickly trading of on the Nigerian Stock Exchange for 6 December, which closed on a negative note. It depreciated by 0.22% to close trade at 26,855.52 basis points, with market capitalization at 12.9 trillion naira. 197 million stocks with 3.5 billion naira exchanged hands at the end of the session in 3,989 deals. The most sought after stocks at the end of the day were United Africa Company of Nigeria, Access Bank and UBA. Top gainers on the chart were United Africa Company of Nigeria, Access Bank and Dangote Sugar. And the decliners were MTN Nigeria, Dangote Cement and Guarantee Trust Bank. With the stock market, we come to the end of this edition of Business Express. You can access all previous episodes on YouTube, and you can communicate with us on Twitter. The handle is @NTA News Now. The hashtag is BizX. We value your feedback, so keep the mails coming and join us again next week, Monday, for another episode of the program. I am Muplang Dakok.